Hey everyone. It's been a while, but I think it's finally time to talk about a subject that has pretty much died down. And at this point, I'm referring to Hank the Tank, as you could probably tell by the title of this episode. So, what is Hank the Tank? Hank the Tank is a bear in Tahoe, California, who was reportedly going around breaking into people's houses and was an absolute menace. He had something like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was 130 B&Es basically, where he was going in looking for like pizza and pop. And that's that becomes really problematic, right? Cuz you'll be hanging out in your house. You got little kids, you got dogs, cats, pets, and all of a sudden, Hank the Tank comes barging in. He wants a pizza. He wants a Coca-Cola, Pepsi, maybe some A&W root beer, and he's just coming on in. And if he thinks like your, pets, your dogs, your cats, maybe even like, maybe feels like, maybe got like a large goldfish, and he's thinks that's food, and like your birds, he wants to eat your budgie birds, all 800 of them. But yeah, or even like your young kids or yourself. Even maybe you're sitting there, you got your headphones on, playing music loud, you can't hear the ruckus. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is he's a real threat. He's kind of a problem in that circumstance. But why is he a problem? Why did he become Hank the Tank? And there's multiple different reasons why. So I'm going to go through this entire story. And the reason I feel like I have to is because I started a GoFundMe for this. When I started it, there was no other GoFundMe. So it was the first Hank the Tank GoFundMe. It was also the most successful one. The donations have died down quite a bit. So I feel like I'm probably I wanted to wind it down this week, but I feel like I got to do an episode first and then give it another week with the episode out of the podcast. That way, maybe we'll get a few more donations. But essentially I started the GoFundMe because I didn't want Hank to be euthanized. Hold on, let me see what the GoFundMe's at. It's at $810, 22 donors, which isn't bad. I mean, considering a lot of these GoFundMes get ignored and not very many of them like go viral or anything. So I can't complain about that. I'm thankful for everyone who donated and everyone's generosity and big hearts out there. But so basically, in most places, if a bear, a large predatory animal, becomes dependent on humans, it basically for life becomes dependent on humans. And the most sought out alternative is euthanasia or destruction of the bear. So, I got a heart for Hank because I feel like he's basically our Frankenstein's monster in a sense where, we as like a society created Hank. And this was done through, a couple different ways. The first one being that the infrastructure regarding garbage disposal and, pickup and all that stuff probably isn't the best. A lot of places with a lot of like a high bear population will have garbage pickup that is, built in a way to prevent bears from breaking into it. So they'll have like secure locked steel boxes at the end of their driveway. I guess in this area, they don't have that kind of proper infrastructure built into the area, which I guess is the Lake Tahoe area in California. Another thing is that a lot of people like to feel like they have some sort of bond or connection to nature. So they feel like, I mean, this is kind of like it's not really controversial, but it is a bit, convoluted on where you draw the line. but I think it's safe to say you probably shouldn't be feeding like apex predators. So a lot of people like to feel like they have some sort of bond or some sort of connection with nature, and they feel like when they can confront a wild animal, that they're doing something in their head where they're feeling like, okay, I'm a good person. This animal senses I'm a good person, and I'm having a special connection, a bond right now. That's not what's happening for the vast majority of these encounters. This animal is just hungry. It sees food, and at this point in time, if it's very friendly and befriending you, it's probably because it has been conditioned severely to be dependent on human food, which isn't a good thing, because now this every time this animal sees humans, it's going to say, every time I see one of these humans, it gives me food. This is where I got to go. I got to seek out these people now to get my food. So when you feed these animals, it makes them prone to feeding or identifying you with food. So, and then you get the average runner, hiker, or tourist, or whatever, who doesn't do this. And all of a sudden, this bear approaches them and they don't know how to react. Let's say they don't have food, or they begin to behave like prey, where they run away scared. And then the bear's primitive instincts kick in and they begin to pursue that person. And then all of a sudden, there's an attack or an injury or, a death. So you can't let these animals become dependent on humans. They have to stay wild. They have to stay. It's about respecting nature. It's about knowing what that creature is. Respecting it, observing it, and by respecting it, you're doing more for it than you are by trying to forge some sort of like domestic bond. Yeah. So it's really sad when this sort of thing happens, especially with like cubs and stuff like that, because a lot of the time you all have like the authorities left with very few choices, because a lot of people say, well, can't they give it to a sanctuary or some sort of reserve? And I'm sure a lot of the times they actually do try to seek that out. But here's the hard reality about that. Maintaining and like supporting a very large apex predator who requires a lot of space and a lot of food isn't exactly financially affordable for a lot of sanctuaries, because they do depend on like donations and charity to sort of make ends meet to keep these animals, and or whether they're rehabilitating them to get back into the wild, or if they're keeping them there for like a long period of time. So a lot of the times you'll contact these places and they'll say, you know what, we're sorry, we just don't have the infrastructure like to build a large area with a durable fence, like a steel fence that's encompasses an area great enough to be sufficient and like appropriate for a large animal like that, because you don't want it living in small quarters either, right? Like I guess some people would argue like, okay, well, keeping it alive is better than killing it. But then it's like, I don't know, if you don't want it to be suffering in human captivity either. So you want to give it a good go. So you want to have the infrastructure to have it. And then feeding it, like that's a lot of food, right? So knowing this, I started a GoFundMe because, I don't know, Hank got like a lot of media attention and publicity. And there's probably a lot of bears out there where this happens to, but it just doesn't blow up. But, when things come into, our minds or over our TV screens or computers or phones, that's when we become aware of them. So once I was aware of it, I thought about it for a day. I started a GoFundMe, and the GoFundMe was very ambitious, but I honestly thought it would get like 0 donations and like it wouldn't raise any money. But I thought, what the heck, might as well do it anyway. What's the harm that could happen? Nothing. And I don't mind feeling silly when I do these kinds of things, because, or like people judging that, like, I don't know, it's such like a, silly feat to try to like dream big or have like big ambitions. But so the ultimate goal was about $50,000, which is, astronomical of an expectation to have for a bear, especially in like these trying times for a lot of people where money isn't, money's a problem for a lot of people. So I wanted to in a perfect situation was like, okay, we're going to save Hank. He can't be relocated because if you relocate him into the wild, he's just going to die off of starvation because right now he was probably severely overweight, lost his ability to effectively hunt, and will just kind of mosey around looking for humans. And if he's really far in the distance, he's not going to find any. So he's probably just going to starve to death. That isn't a good outcome for him. If you relocate him to an area where there's another population of people nearby, he's just going to become a problem for them. You're just passing the buck on to another area of people. So the only real alternative seemed like we got to put him in a sanctuary. Now, my goal wasn't to make a sanctuary, but it was to like support whatever sanctuary would come to take Hank in. And I figured around 50 grand, you could probably build a decent sized infrastructure. You could put a lot of like quality of life things in there. You could put in like trees, fruit bearing trees, lots of berry plants, so that he could like naturally forage around his area. Maybe even if it was large enough, you put in sort of like a little pond where you could have, farm raised salmon or something like that in it. So he could like hunt for himself as well as, the sanctuary providing, a sustainable diet for him. There's big dreams. But going into this, I realized there's a real possibility that Hank could just be destroyed, in which case the money wouldn't be able to fund him. So I decided to say all the money raised, regardless of what happens to Hank, if it is impossible to go towards the the sanctuary, that it would go towards animal rescue agencies or pet shelters, sanctuaries, or people that specialize in bear relocation. Now I think there's a thing in California called like the Bear Legion or the Bear League. It's the Bear League. That's what it's called. And I'm thinking that is probably where the donations are going to go. I know what you're probably thinking if you're not familiar with this story right now, is that you think Hank was probably destroyed. That isn't the case as far as I know right now. So rest assured. So what actually happened with this is they began to investigate all the break-ins and, all the areas where they could extract DNA. And from the DNA extraction, they determined that Hank, the tank, wasn't just one black bear. He was approximately 3 different black bears. So when that news came out, that changed the game significantly, because that meant this isn't just one severely dependent bear dependent on humans. It was actually 3 bears who more or less may not be absolutely dependent on humans. They just might be supplementing their diet with humans, which still isn't a good thing, and it still shouldn't be happening, and there probably should be more done to prevent that from happening. But in this circumstance, these bears could probably be relocated to somewhere in the distant wilderness, and it not have a great impact on them. They'll still be able to effectively hunt, this and that and the other. So in this circumstance, it looks like it's a good thing, and the money should probably go to the agencies involved or that are normally involved in the relocation of black bears and grizzly bears. And in California, I believe that's the Bear League. They do a great job. They advocate for a lot to prevent the destruction of bears. And in this circumstance, I feel like, I'm sure if Hank would have been like a very special bear and he was really this notorious, that they probably would have stepped in majorly to help all this. So I'd like to say I'm pretty sure. I still have to look into it, and I want to get a sense of what some of the donors want as well. Because, maybe they will prefer the money to go to like an animal shelter for like cats and dogs in, like the California area. But I think given the nature of the GoFundMe and how it had to do with like bears and wildlife in general, that I think that's probably the best and most appropriate move. Yeah, so that's essentially the story of Hank the Tank. He's the soda crushing, door smashing, garage door banging Hank the Tank. The calorie consuming, salad dodging, chair crushing, menace to society. But, like I said earlier, he's our problem. We create these kind of monsters, and just because they become inconvenient for us after we create them, I don't think we should destroy them. I think we should learn from it. We should become more respecting of nature. We should learn to live in harmony with nature. That's one thing we don't do, is when nature becomes inconvenient for us, instead of respecting it or trying to live in harmony better with it, because I guess it is financially costly and it takes, you have to invest in infrastructure. So like you would have to invest in a strong garbage disposal, maybe one that locks, that bears can't open, like an anti-bear garbage. Very costly. But these are sort of the things you have to learn to live with when you're there. And I don't think just killing everything off and removing them from the population is the answer. It's about harmony. It's not about creating more imbalance or like a greater imbalance in nature and wildlife. Everything's key to, the food chain and the ecosystem. You need to have things like bears. They clean up. They get rid of a lot of the carcasses. They scavenge. They also hunt. They're the only things that hunt themselves. Basically, they're an apex predator, and they are known to take out other cubs and stuff like that. And that does seem a little bit cruel, but it's all kind of like a part of the food chain. Because if they didn't kind of kill each other, there would be nothing that would kill them, and they would just become, an overpopulated species. So it's kind of cool that they have their own kind of checks and balances and regulations and baked into like their gene code or like their into the food chain. And then I guess there's people that argue, well, that's where people step in and that's why they should be hunting them. I mean, debatable. There is a debate there, but I don't know if I like it, because I like to think of nature, this is probably wrong, but sort of like it could function without humanity. It probably would change greatly over time, obviously. And we like to think of nature as being something that we should always keep the same. Try not to let any species die off or go extinct, which is true, we shouldn't. But another thing is that, extinction and evolution is sort of a part of the natural ecosystem as well. It's just a matter of how much of that is, human impacted. That's where I think we need to draw the line, is that we don't really need to be interfering. We can let just nature take its course and let life find its way, with us just sort of living in harmony with it. And so that's basically the story of Hank the Tank. A short little podcast for today. I hope maybe to hit 1,000. It's at 810. I don't think 1,000 is too far out there. Definitely going to try again. I think I'm going to leave it up for a week. I'm very busy this week. I don't know if there'll be another podcast until like later next week, but I'm going to keep putting them out. I'm trying to increase the quality of them. I hope you enjoy the past two guests. Very, very great people doing great things. There's probably a few more in the pipe. I'm trying to, get on the show. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the story of Hank the Tank. And if you feel generous enough to donate, by all means. But like I said, times are getting tough. So not everybody can donate. So don't feel bad if you can't. There's other things you can do that are probably better than donating, and that is just sharing the GoFundMe. Just sharing it to like-minded people, because even if you don't contribute like financially to it, that's a little bit too much to ask from a lot of people, I find. And I always feel kind of like guilty or like weird asking people for money, especially for something that's not very I don't know, dire, especially like since he's not being destroyed now. As far as I know, I might have to look more into it. But sharing it can get to a lot of people. It can get to a lot of people that maybe have a lot of like extra income or like to make donations for tax purposes so they don't get dinged as much at the end of the year. So, just sharing it to where you can, and then you end up being responsible for it reaching, someone who can. That's basically just as good, I think. I don't know, in my opinion. I always think like sharing and like distributing and like it's basically like free advertising. And all it takes is like the swipe of a finger. It's pretty huge. And I found out with this Hank the Tank one, a lot of it was just circulated through people sharing it. And there was a handful of people that really helped out. Yeah, really great people. So everyone, the message is let's live in harmony with nature. Let's stop creating these monsters, and yeah, let's do our part. All right, guys, you can follow me on Instagram at Epyon Explorers. That's EPYON Explorers. I take some photos, do some photography on there. I'm pretty garbage at it compared to a lot of the people I follow, but that's a part of the learning curve, I suppose. Yeah, if you enjoy this podcast, follow it on any platform you're listening to it on. Share it with friends. Like I just explained, sharing is huge. I can't really think of what else. I don't know. Rate it however you want, whatever you think, deem it worthy of. Obviously, I want high scores, but listen, I'm a realist, so if it's garbage, it's garbage. Rate it garbage. Can't improve without knowing what I'm doing wrong, right? And then, yeah. So, anyway, I'm out. I'll see y'all later.